Welcome to On Our Watch, a podcast about coastal erosion and sustainability in Louisiana, as well as the implications for coastal systems worldwide. My name is Marian Evans. I'm a filmmaker and a producer of the documentary On Our Watch, a feature-length film about Louisiana's coastal land loss crisis. The film's director, Jonathan Evans, and I are proud to produce this podcast series that will continue to explore important coastal issues through conversations with local residents, community leaders, and experts. In this episode, we're speaking with David Waggonner. David is the founding principal of Waggonner Ball, an internationally active architecture and environment practice based in New Orleans. And now, our interview with David Waggonner. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, David.
Thank you.
So, I wanted to start by asking you about how you decided to transform Waggonner Ball following Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and why was it important for you to embrace water as a major factor in the architecture and design of the city?
Yeah, well, it wasn't me, it was the place. It was apparent that we had a water issue here. We'd gone through the planning processes that came after Katrina, where there was a lot of well-intentioned people trying to figure out what to do about this. And water really wasn't part of the discussion. Safety wasn't part of the discussion. Having been exposed to the Dutch and the way they thought that was clearly an attractive way. People in New Orleans did not trust government. All levels had failed. That problem continues a bit, but they trusted somehow that the Dutch had a way to deal with this. And so, so what are your alternatives and what's an attractive alternative? And so that was really the pivot was towards some way that might have a better way for us to live in harmony and not against these systems. We have this society that's based on ideas of engineering and efficiency, and those are insufficient ideas. And so this was a more holistic approach about how you would make more from the tragedy that we'd experienced.
Right. And so for those who may be unfamiliar, can you explain what the Dutch dialogues are and what came out of that process?
Well, Dutch dialogues was something that was extemporaneous. It wasn't intentional that we would have 3 in New Orleans and continue to do it in Norfolk or Charleston. It was a process innovation. We went through a period of trying to find people of like minds and good spirit in the Netherlands. Had some support, good support from the Dutch embassy, Dale Morris, who was there then. We went around, and they're good Calvinists and thought that they should contribute as they could and hope to receive something. And so that was the way that it occurred. It occurred, though, first as a symposium situation, exchanging ideas, what fits, what doesn't fit. The breakthrough was when we put design as the lead. In our society, we want community-based design. And in that era, we were really pretty alert to who was involved as community representatives. So we brought those people from here and brought the international experts into that. The second one was where we had the breakthroughs and showed some drawing that could say this would be a different way to see the city, the region. And then the third we did as part of the American Planning Association, because there was something different that was occurring. But on reflection, I think that often people are hesitant to propose. And Dutch Dialogue said, well, we can go ahead and propose something here. We have enough knowledge of the local situation. We have enough involvement with people who represent the community. And so that was really that is the innovation of it. It's the process of bringing people who are from different generations. That's the key. And you've talked to Rami and Andy here. That's a different generation. Obviously, it was international. The problem is not limited to one locality. It's broad, and we're a deltaic city. There aren't that many deltaic cities, but Rotterdam is a deltaic city. And so, then the other component of that was the interdisciplinary side. So you're bringing people of with different training into the discussion at one time. So, we found subsequently to this day that bringing people together to work on a specific area, we were not dealing with a general problem, we were dealing with problem areas and what would be a way to think about these pre-identified problem areas. But bringing these different disciplines together with different attributes was part of that innovation.
What do you think is unique about Waggoner Ball's approach to architecture, and what would you say is the driving philosophy of this firm?
Well, we've always been committed to quality. We try to operate with principles in mind. I said something about safety being a principle that was not prioritized, and safety's vital if you're living below sea level. How do you do that safely? Scientific method is involved because the firm really cut its teeth, had its root in renovation work, which relies on observation of factors that are occurring in time and over time. So I think we were grounded in place. We are grounded in place wherever we work. We try to be local. I hope we listen to the client, but to the situation. Mac Ball, who was my partner for a long time, and I used to say that we eschewed the idea of being clever, that some cool little thing we could do would just get tiresome after a while. Mm-hmm. So the philosophy has always been that we would try to do things that were arrogant, as to say, timeless. Now I look back and think, well, we made buildings in the 80s and 90s that people would want to renovate. They wouldn't want to demolish and start over. So we were working with a vision. We did a lot of site repair always. We had many projects that were internal to campuses and so forth. The philosophy is about improving things over time, working now, knowing the past, being aware of the future, but really trying to make sure that your contribution in time is worthy. And so it's not about showing off. It's not necessarily form-based. A lot of architecture is literally caught in a box, right angles, or desperate efforts to create a new form. I think where it ties back with the water is this commitment to the material. And whether it was a brick or dirt or groundwater or surface water, we were interested in the interaction of physical things, hopefully with some spiritual dimension.
Right.
So that's kind of the broad array of things that influence us.
So I know that Waggoner Ball has led the development of the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that project is about and how it has been implemented.
I think, I like the present tense. Mm-hmm. I think it's dangerous when people's minds get stuck in the past, and I could say, well, that was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We finished that in 2013. There's funding that ensued from different efforts in that. There's some work you do in that sense. You're really trying to reserve space. The spatial quality is a kind of clunky term, but relevant. You really want to create a more beautiful place, city in our case, right? So constantly looking for that opportunity, but through the lens of water. So you could look at it as a transportation problem. Yes, it is that, but it's also what's the water impact there? How do you look under the freeway to find the opportunity that would be for water instead of homelessness? What would you do about that? Well, you run into all kinds of regulatory issues, but those in time have to be broken because those are vast swaths of many cities. New Orleans has a wondrous characteristic of thinking it's totally unique. It is unique, it is different, but it is not totally unique. We share things with other cities. And so the water plan was really looking through the lens of water at the regional opportunities. That it was a swath from out, to the west in Jefferson, to the east in St. Bernard. It didn't deal on a primary basis with government or policy. That was the nature of what we were doing at that time. It was more physical, spatial, design oriented. Those things that are related to organization and management are still relevant, and in some cases have impeded progress, but have not changed or pointed an error in direction, because documents of that kind are social and they're directional.
Yeah. And like you said, New Orleans is not unique. There's other coastal cities and places that deal with similar issues. So I wanted to ask you about, going beyond Louisiana. I know Waggonner Ball has several projects in other places. So why do you think it's important to engage with other coastal communities in this way?
Well, because there's information that shares, we learned some things. We know some things. New Orleans, it's been said, and I've heard and said, it's a prophetic city. It actually portends a future for other places. And if we know this, we should tell others in not frightening terms that they also should think about this. If you are going to levee your city and you're going to put pumps on weak soil, you are going to sink that soil. Right? So we have knowledge now that we accrued, old knowledge from 800 years of the Netherlands. Some we know quite a lot. We know the American system. So what can we contribute? Coastal cities are primary in that sense, but they're riverine cities that have similar conditions. Shreveport, Louisiana has a floodway that, it needs to function as a floodway. Well, if you do that, then how do you make an economy out of that? You learn by case study. The business schools taught that forever, right? Case study was how you would learn. Well, we learn as architects by case study. So, the lessons learned in New Orleans may apply to Norfolk. The lessons learned in Norfolk may apply to Charleston. These lessons may apply or not apply to Miami with different soils and different social conditions. And how are they going to apply to the Bay Area and San Francisco? If you're curious, this is stimulating, right? And, the old Bob Dylan line that my generation internalized about he not busy being born is busy dying. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to be born. Right.
And I think it's important to share information so that other places can maybe avoid some of the same problems.
They don't know them. There was a feedback loop in New Orleans in the 20s and 30s when they first started to pump the city that was ignored. There was a feedback loop that was occurring in the late 20s, early 30s with the Corps of Engineers when they completely levied the river. And the way it was they said somebody later will figure it out. Well, that deferred because status quo and why do I need to take on these wicked problems? So you don't want people to set up to have to solve a problem that they don't have to set up the problem, right? You want them to make this a more, a graceful way of transition or adaptation. But cities each are different. So, it's not like the problem we have in New Orleans, which at this point in time is economic as much as anything else, population-based and lack of an economy, are the same as in Norfolk, where they're quite functioning and they have a recurring economy, but they have this giant naval base that's right at sea level, and the adaptations are very difficult. And Charleston, which has, a tidal problem that's just endless, and Miami, which has a geological problem, and San Francisco has another set of problems. So it's not like you can copy paste.
Yeah.
And that's why it's always a research agenda too. I said scientific method. Well, there are certain things about that, and our science is not. It's kind of popular science. It's not. It's not genome editing.
What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you've learned over the course of your career?
To be present. Yeah. Not to learn from the past and think about the future, but to practice now, to live now. There's never. You can only do it now.
Yeah.
I think the methodology grows, knowing that it will come back to this set of situations. So you're learning. When you start architecture school, they don't tell you how to address that problem. They give you a problem and you flail around and you come back, and you didn't have any elegance of approach. But so you're assimilating these lessons by practice. It's gradual, right? But you're bringing those lessons to now. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the lessons you learn, though, that you think are new, are things you knew when you were young. They may not be new at all. They may remind you of your youth or my youth. And so I think, I look at, documents that were published when I was a kid, like whole Earth catalog, taking a look at the entirety of the planetary system. Well, that seems to be a lesson now, doesn't it? Well, it's not new. It's not something the native people don't know to take care of the Earth. So in terms of lessons I've learned, I just think we have to be better stewards. I think that when I was practicing in the beginning, I didn't quite understand the limits of technology. I didn't really understand the ecosystem limitations and the problem of consumption. That we never are satisfied. We want more. Growth is what drives our society, right? Well, where does that end? And so I think these are lessons that we need to communicate. Those are lessons now. The priorities of a city like New Orleans, where we put preservation pretty high up on the list. Well, that's good because we don't have to go and consume other assets to build this new thing. But what you see is, again, we're not so wealthy here, and so when we do build, we don't necessarily build to be durable over time in this brutal climate we have, right? So we're wasting. And I think what concerns me, we've gone through periods in language and architecture about sustainability, and then we're in this resiliency period, and I've been pondering more the sufficiency question. When's it enough? There are people in architecture who say you shouldn't really be looking to build more. You should be looking to renovate, to sustain these things that we have. So I think the elegance of doing more with less.
Interesting.
It really where the practice and my personal thing has come or is coming.
Yeah. And like you said, it's good to learn from the past, but that doesn't mean that the way it happened before is exactly how it's going to happen now. So it's better to be in the present. Are there any projects or goals that you would really like to see happen in the future?
Well, self-awareness would be a good project. I would. I would be. I don't think it has to do with architecture as much as it does with just principles of behavior. Self-respect, but telling the truth. I didn't know that would be quite so debatable. Mm-hmm. When I was young, I thought the truth was fairly stable. I think honesty is a project that we all should engage. You're asking more about physical projects. And, I think it can be modest or it can be bold. But what I would like to see is people beginning the experimentation about this adaptation back to more natural systems. It's a long course, right? You have to build, to monitor, measure it, learn, do more. Well, at the rate we're going, it's not so different from the carbon question. We're waiting so long to ever do anything. We're beyond the curve. Well, we're also not moving into the adaptation, this adaptation. I would like to see people put in practice. I'd like to, see parks that we know will function, and how will they function, and what will be the life around that. We're inherently social creatures.
Yeah.
So I think that it's how we learn together. But if there are things we know we should have done 10 years ago, why can't we get them done so we can be learning from them? Why can't people in New Orleans, there is a group of people from New Orleans going to the Netherlands this month, and they're going to go see canals, right? They're singles, call them what you will. Different words mean different things to different people. But you shouldn't have to go to the Netherlands to see a canal. We have a fine one at Orleans Avenue. We would treat it and take those walls down. They're residual. Why don't we, in our own place, make it more beautiful? Why don't we take better care of our own place and tell people, hey, you can go see this park or you can go see that, and expand our offering here? The Lafitte Carter, which is fine, really gotten a lot of people in there. Well, that used to be Basin Street, right? What about the ability to put water into this environment? So I still believe water is a good thing. I don't think we really understand the power it has. We don't know very often in New Orleans there's a river over there.
Right, I know.
We're cut off from our own life source, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we're interested, we're architects. We like to do things, build things, not build, protect, I don't know. But San Francisco has great opportunities. We'd love to be involved in San Francisco. That's a city that used to be more like New Orleans. Our economic conditions have changed so greatly. But there are lessons that we know that we can carry and things we can learn there and bring here. New Orleans is a port city. That means things come and go. We've got to increase that exchange.
Yeah.
We also now, as part of a new configuration of the company, have more ability to do the whole thing instead of just the front thing. Mm-hmm. So we use this phrase, I don't know if anybody else has said it to you, ideation to implementation. Because we'd like to build these things, right? But whether it's the perimeter of Charleston, which could be a beautiful, they call it battery for the piece they built, and you can have a beautiful thing in there. But you've got then the internal aspect of water to manage. Well, how do you do that? All that said, buildings are still good. Buildings are really, parks don't pay taxes. They create opportunities for buildings that pay taxes. Cities have to be sustainable economically. If you talk about no growth, well, where's the money? So we'd like to contribute to this balance of how do you live in a place in a productive way, in a happy, healthy way, and it's a sustainable city and not just on government grants. So I think that wherever we are, we'd really just like to make it better. What does that mean? Well, it depends on the condition, right?
Yeah.
But it's a social profession too. We have to work with others. We work with other disciplines. We work with clients. I think these principles that are involved about respect and listening and being honest, we need to practice.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, David. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for listening to On Our Watch. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with David Waggonner. Don't forget to subscribe to On Our Watch on your favorite podcast app to be notified about future episodes. You can find our feature-length documentary On Our Watch, as well as a video version of today's episode, in the links below. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode next week. This podcast is made possible through support from the Greater New Orleans Foundation and executive produced by Bruno UK Steiner.